couple of really funny editorials, essays in that book about time and the idea that the woke have this crazy idea that, people who lived 500 years ago really should have known better.
Yeah.
They have this magic moral time machine where they imagine what they would be doing in 1758, and it's always better than what
And it wouldn't have been using the term master bedroom.
No. That's another thing, yes.
Right?
And again, that's another point I'm always trying to make, is that the difference between old school liberals like me and the woke is things like that. People, I think, have this idea that wokeness is an extension of liberalism, and it very often is something that goes so far, it actually turns around.
Yes, Bill Maher sat down with Megyn Kelly for what started as a simple conversation. But when the topic turned to woke culture, the atmosphere exploded like the 4th of July. Sparks flew, voices sharpened, and suddenly it wasn't just an interview, it became a showdown. Maher went as far as saying that woke culture isn't an evolution of liberalism, but an entirely new and radical offshoot. It's both fascinating and surprising to see him openly distance himself from the far left. Buckle up, folks, because this one's about to get intense.
Problem with wokeness is nobody ever gets canceled for being too woke. That's how you wind up with men can get pregnant.
Yeah.
Because you can say the most ridiculous thing, and because no one wants to be the one who's called out on Twitter, they'll be like, "Oh, sure, men pregnant."
Sure.
I've always
Sure.
said that. I saw a dude who was glowing today. It's just so ridiculous what you can get away with saying, and just the
Maher is boldly calling out his fellow leftists, the ones who quietly roll their eyes at the extreme left, but are too afraid to speak up. He believes many liberals secretly agree that woke ideology has gone too far, yet they stay silent, afraid of being labeled or canceled. According to Maher, this silence is a big part of the problem. He insists that more people need to stand up against the excesses of wokeism before it completely weakens the moral and cultural foundation of the nation. For him, this isn't just a political issue, but a societal one, and he warns that if people don't push back soon, fear-driven conformity will destroy everything liberalism once stood for.
You don't seem like someone who's ever felt that. Have you managed to escape
Felt
ever
what?
afraid of blowback from your own side?
Well, I mean, come on, I've been on 31 years. It comes with the territory every week. When people say to me on Saturday, "How'd the show go last night?" I'd say, if I'm not canceled today, it went great. I mean, they're always looking to take you down, and the knives are always out. But, I feel like at this point, after 31 years, if they wind up getting me, okay, I had a pretty good run.
That's right.
And also, I think there's just a lot of people who have my back, and they appreciate what I do, and they appreciate me having that bond with my audience, that I don't pull a punch, and I never will. And it's made me, lose some audience. That's true. I say it in the introduction of the book. I say, I have lost some people, and I don't miss them. Those are the more...
Maher has faced constant backlash, even from his own political circle, but he's never flinched or backed down. Over the years, he's built a backbone strong enough to withstand the fury of the woke mob, and to his credit, he's still standing tall. Love him or hate him, you have to respect that kind of conviction. While not everyone agrees with Maher on every issue, most can admit he has the courage to call out the extremes of the woke left. Their policies, as Maher and many others believe, do little to unite or uplift anyone. Instead, they divide, shame, and silence. And in an era where most people tiptoe around outrage, Maher's defiance feels like a rare breath of honesty. He openly admits that the left, too, has gone off the deep end in its own way. As he often tells fellow Democrats and liberals, they don't need to lecture him about Donald Trump. He was one of the first to sound the alarm bells. But he also understands why some people vote for Trump. Because, as he explains, the frustrations they express aren't without reason.
Yes, went off the deep end also, in their own way. And so what I always tell people who are Democrats and liberals is, you don't have to lecture me about Donald Trump. I'm the one who was sounding the alarm bells before anybody. But I also get why people vote for him. I absolutely do. Because the stuff that, for example, you just said is in the swimming pool, and the stuff that is threatening to people that comes from the left is so much more in their everyday life. It's not vague. Like to most people, what's Trump and democracy? It's a vague thought. And Ukraine, that's very far away. Was it impeachable? Who knows? But I know about my kid coming home from school and saying, well, they're telling me I can't tell you.
Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of thing that gets under our skin too, which is why we keep pushing back against woke ideology. Maher's frustration is completely understandable. He's angered by the idea of biological men sharing bathrooms with women, calling it a clear violation of common sense and personal boundaries. What troubles him even more is how schools encourage children to make life-changing decisions like gender transitions while keeping parents uninformed. To him, that's not progress. It's chaos disguised as compassion. Maher's point is simple yet powerful. When ideology starts to override biology, reason, and parental rights, society begins to lose its footing. And that's why he refuses to stay silent, no matter how fierce the backlash gets.
Suggesting to your perfectly normal son that he might be a girl. At my all-boys school, they kept asking them over and over, raise your hand.
Well,
where are you on the scale of girl to boy, 0 through 5?
I did an editorial only like 3 weeks ago, and I used the word entrapment. I mean, it was about comparing what goes on in the schools with entrapment. I don't think anybody had ever put it that way. But entrapment in the law, I'm sure you know this better than I do, means suggesting someone into a crime.
Yep.
Something they wouldn't have thought of to do anyway. I mean, I used the example of after 9/11, there were a number of cases where law enforcement basically entrapped people who were not really going to be terrorists. The one case I mentioned was the Liberty Seven guys in Liberty City, Miami, a poor section of Miami.
According to Bill, the fringe left has developed a subtle but dangerous tactic: psychological entrapment. He claims they're planting ideas about gender transition in the minds of impressionable school children. It often starts harmlessly, with teachers or counselors repeatedly asking kids if they've ever felt different or thought about changing their gender. At first, the children might not have even considered it, but after hearing it over and over, the idea begins to take root. Constant exposure turns suggestion into curiosity, and curiosity into confusion. Maher argues that this repetitive conditioning isn't about freedom or identity, it's manipulation disguised as inclusion. And it risks reshaping young minds before they're even old enough to understand the consequences.
Say to me, you make fun of the left more than you used to. Yes, I do. First of all, I'm a comedian, and you're a lot funnier than you used to be. Not intentionally, but you are. Not just pregnant men and identity politics and oversensitivity and victim culture and cancel culture. There's lots of funny stuff. But if I ever needed a reason or a rationale for making the case that the left has changed, it would be this. The fact that they're now marching for the terrorists, really?
Right.
The people who see themselves as the most liberal people in the world, the social justice warriors, are standing with some of the most illiberal people.
And that truly boggles the mind. How can liberals who claim to fight for freedom align themselves with groups and ideologies that reject everything liberalism stands for? It's the height of hypocrisy. These factions enforce some of the harshest and most repressive laws on earth, rules so extreme they would make even the most hardline conservatives recoil. In their societies, women are stripped of their basic rights and dignity. They can't vote, can't drive, and are often forced to cover every inch of their bodies, sometimes even their eyes. The very principles of gender equality and personal liberty that liberals proudly defend are crushed under these regimes. So the question remains, how can those who preach tolerance and women's empowerment turn a blind eye, or worse, offer support to cultures that openly silence and oppress women? That's where the irony becomes unbearable. It's astonishing that many in the LGBTQ community openly support movements or regimes that, in truth, have zero tolerance for their existence. These are not allies of equality or acceptance, they're the embodiment of oppression. Yet somehow, activists in the West continue to march in solidarity with them, blinded by ideology and selective outrage. Maher's frustration lies in this painful contradiction: people defending movements that would destroy them if given the chance. It's not just ironic, it's dangerously naive.
Problems with the left today is they see race in everything. So, nothing ever, and again, as the guy who was trying to be the common sense person in the middle, just speak for the normies, everything, I think, to a lot of people strikes it the way it strikes me, as we start with one thing, this idea over here, and then we're all the way on the other side over here. In this issue, of course, as we were saying over there are people who are bigoted, and that's wrong. And of course, it's great that we got more impatient with racism in this country. That is the appropriate response I think we should have toward racism, being impatient with it. And then it goes all the way to, and no one who is a person of color can ever do anything wrong. That's how you get.
And that's another sensitive issue most people are too afraid to talk about. All races are capable of committing crimes, not just white people. Crime has no color, no ethnicity, and no political side. Yet in today's overly cautious climate, a dangerous double standard often appears. Crimes committed by white individuals are amplified, dissected, and endlessly debated, while those committed by so-called marginalized groups are frequently ignored or excused in the name of social use. Maher finds this imbalance deeply troubling because it weakens the very principles of fairness and accountability. When society starts judging guilt or innocence based on identity instead of actions, justice loses its purpose. For Maher, this selective outrage isn't progress, it's moral decline pretending to be virtue. And he's absolutely right to call it out.
So there's a couple of really funny editorials, essays in that book about time. And the idea that the woke have this crazy idea that, people who lived 500 years ago really should have known better.
Yeah.
They have this magic moral time machine where they imagine what they would be doing in 1758, and it's always better than
And it wouldn't have been using the term master bedroom.
No. That's another thing, yes.
Right?
And again, that's another point I'm always trying to make, is that the difference between old school liberals like me and the woke is things like that. People, I think, have this idea that wokeness is an extension of liberalism, and it very often is something that goes so far, it actually turns around and becomes...
Yes, Bill Maher has finally thrown in the towel on the fringe left, and honestly, who can blame him? In his eyes, they've drifted so far from real liberalism that they're almost unrecognizable. Maher believes these extremists no longer stand for open debate, free thought, or tolerance, the very foundations liberalism was built on. Instead, they've sunk into moral posturing and rewriting history. One of his biggest frustrations is their obsession with judging the past through the lens of modern values. They arrogantly assume that if they had lived centuries ago, they have been more enlightened, fair, and progressive. Maher calls that pure delusion. To him, it shows the fringe left isn't interested in understanding history or improving society, they just want to appear virtuous and superior. And that, he says, signals the death of honest liberalism.
Just mentioned about master bedroom or, blacklist, or these terms.
Rule of thumb.
JIP, reservation, I guess we're not supposed to say because it, insulting to the Indians. What are you supposed to say when you go to a restaurant?
There's something wrong with picnic, too. We're not allowed to say picnic anymore. I can't remember why.
We have a, we're supposed to eat here?
Right.
It's just, so again, wokeness seems a lot about canceling people, catching people at something, renaming stuff. Liberalism was at least about trying to fix things. It was about trying to lift people up. The people who had been forgotten, genuinely, and there are many of them, and downtrodden. These are the people we wanted to lift up. That's different than just pointing fingers and saying...
That's exactly what the woke mob embodies, a self-proclaimed moral elite convinced they're purer, smarter, and more righteous than everyone else. They move through society with a moral microscope, waiting for someone to make the slightest mistake so they can pounce. It's less about progress and more about punishment. Their weapon of choice is language, twisting words until they mean whatever suits their outrage of the day. Ordinary expressions are reinterpreted, redefined, and weaponized to shame or cancel anyone who dares to think differently. It's a culture built on traps and landmines where intent no longer matters, only perception does. Maher sees this as a dangerous shift from genuine activism to linguistic tyranny, where people are forced to tiptoe around every sentence just to avoid being labeled as villains.
Who hates racism the most contest with someone on the woke left. It's like,
Right.
You know what? I hate it too. Okay? Shouldn't that be enough?
Except I also hate anti-white racism. Unlike them, that's the problem.
And things have changed. They also there's a essay in there about progressophobia, which was Steven Pinker's great term that he coined. That it is a real problem on the left. They do not want to acknowledge progress, which is crazy because it is the product they're selling.
Yeah.
Because somehow in their mind, if you acknowledge progress, then you're not as pure as the other person who says, no, things are still horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, lots of things are still horrible, and things just objectively are way better. Can we just...
Another point Maher raises, and one the fringe left refuses to acknowledge, is the undeniable progress society has made. They act as if nothing has changed, as though we're still living in the 1800s. Maher finds it absurd that they refuse to admit slavery, at least in its historical form, has been abolished. They ignore the hard-won victories generations fought for: civil rights, women's rights, and equal opportunities. Today, Black Americans and women enjoy freedoms, representation, and protections that were once unimaginable. Yet instead of celebrating this progress, the fringe insists on portraying modern society as irredeemably oppressive. For Maher, that mindset isn't activism, it's denial. Recognizing progress doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means appreciating how far we've come while still working to improve. But the fringe prefers outrage over perspective, grievance over gratitude, and that's what Maher can't stand. In the end, his message is clear: the fringe left has lost its way. What began as a movement for equality and progress has turned into one of censorship, hypocrisy, and moral arrogance. Maher isn't becoming conservative, he's defending reason, balance, and honesty. He believes true liberalism should celebrate progress, not deny it, and encourage debate, not silence it. And as long as the woke mob keeps twisting reality, Maher will keep calling them out loudly and unapologetically. This brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.